Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Perth South Model Railway. And I'm sorry it's been such a long time since I uploaded a video to YouTube. Really, you'll see what I've been doing is lots more track laying and wiring, and I didn't want to do another video based in that, so I thought it was better to push on, get the track laying and wiring complete, and then bring you another video, and that's what I've done. Luckily, I had bought all the track and all the electronic components a couple of years ago, so I was able to push on during lockdown and get all this work done. And as of today, we have all the main line, all the main tracks complete. Still some sidings to be done, as you'll see. So what I'll do today is I'll give you a quick tour around the layout, showing you what I've done, remind you of the track plan, and then at the end we'll go back to this running session, and you'll be able to see some of the capabilities of train controller applied to this track layout. So just a quick reminder of the track layout. First of all, this is the low level. This is the track laying that I did last year in 2019. These are the hidden storage loops. This is the south reverse loop, the north reverse loop, allowing trains in both directions to be turned. These tracks here and on the other side are the ramps that go up to the upper level, and if let me just see, yeah, initially I had a temporary arrangement here to allow trains to stay in the low level. This was to check that it all worked, to get me used to the computer control arrangements, and that has now been taken out. And if I move on to the upper level, first of all, the station. This was all the track work was carried out earlier on this year. The intention is that this is a kind of scenic break, so that looking along the length of the station, it will appear to disappear into the distance, and these tracks here are disguised. These are the Dundee lines, and these head down to the low level, as does this section of track here. Moving on to the loops at the south end of Perth. These are prototypically in a north-south direction. I've had to turn them through 180 degrees. Goods yards, I'll talk all about these in a moment when I'm giving you a tour of the actual layout. The loco depot, the tracks at the south end that head back down to the low level. So let's look at the layout as it actually is in the flesh, so to speak, and we'll get into it all in a bit more detail. Well, those of you who watched the last video will recognise this as being the station area. I haven't really done much more in this area. Obviously want to get on, hopefully in the coming weeks, onto the scenery and start installing some platforms. For anyone who's familiar with Perth Station, this represents platform 1, where the class 26 is, followed by platform 2, 3, and then 4. The offices and some of the station buildings are between these two platforms, and then we have the two bay platforms 5 and 6. And finally, further over here, we have platform 7, which is the main upline or northern track. Beyond that are the carriage sidings, and beyond that will be the wall of the station. I've put in a couple of extra bits of woodwork. This here is for the frontage of the station, which is here, and up into the 1960s there was a kind of link corridor went across from platform 2 to platform 3, and Remains to be seen how much of that actually get in. The St Leonard's Road overbridge is going to be in this position where this Pico local cradle is, and this was the location where a lot of railway photographers in the 1960s set up their cameras and were able to take views of the various locos waiting to depart from Perth Station. The track work in this area is a pretty good match to what was at Perth and indeed what is there today. Certainly all the mainline track work. Coming to what will be the south of the station, just where the Digitrax handheld is roughly where the signal box is going to be, where it is in real life. And then we come to a series of loops. Now, of course, in real life, these are dead straight in a kind of north-south direction. To fit them in with the layout, I have to bend them through 180 degrees. So this is the first stage of the track laying that I started during lockdown. These boards are designed to lift up should I need to get to the tracks underneath. The area here, which is exposed, where you can see the low-level tracks, this will eventually be covered with a scenic area, so you won't actually see the tracks down below. But in the meantime, it gives good access should anything untoward happen in the sets of points that lead into the hidden sidings down below. Because I'm using computer control, the element of operator error is removed from operating the hidden sidings. I don't intend these sidings underneath to be a fiddle yard. The idea is that they would be loaded up with trains, and they would be used, those trains would be used throughout an operating session, and then the trains would be removed or changed at the end of the operating session. There is access, easy access here to the closest siding, and also the southern reverse loop gives access as well for changing trains should I want to change trains during an operating session. At the southern end of these loops we have some sets of points. Because these sets of points are above the storage siding tracks underneath, I've had to use low profile tortoise remote mounts, and so the actual tortoise mechanism is actually remote from the set of points. They're further over between the tracks underneath, so that they don't interfere with trains passing the tracks. These tracks, as I said, do kind of represent the prototype situation to an extent. Looking to the leftmost track, this represents my down and up slow line. In real life, Perth had a down and up set of slow lines that went right around the outside of the station, allowed freight traffic to access the north end, the yards at the north end of Perth, and up to the Perth New Marshalling Yard. This is my, I guess, gesture towards the slow lines, although my slow line does stop at the south end of the station here, where it comes back into the main line. Next we have the down and up main lines. I have added some super elevation or cant to these two tracks. This was my first attempt at doing that. Maximum cant in the real railway is 6 inches, and which is 2 millimeters in double O gauge. I've gone for a kind of scale 3 inches or 1mm plastic art strips that I've put all the way around, and I've used I've stepped down the plastic card over about 8 inches at the end to ease down the cant from 1mm here to 0 as we come round onto the straight. You are building in to some extent a derailment risk as you tilt up or twist the track into the cant. So it's important to, as in real railways, to have a fairly long transition between the curve and the straight. So down and up main lines, and then beside them we have the down and up Dundee lines or Dundee loops. Next to these two tracks I have another 2 loops. Now in real life, and indeed still today, there are 3 loops next to the Dundee lines. At the present moment the real life ones are covered in trees and bushes. In my layout I've got 2 loops here, and I use these as freight reception and departure lines. My boards here, where the paperwork is laid, is part of what's going to be a goods yard. Again, in real life there was a goods wagon maintenance, a wagon repair depot in this area in the prototype, but I'm going to have a goods yard. This is the mineral yard, and then further round off these sidings we'll have a general goods yard. I've been using this as a kind of workbench at the moment, but the area where the laptop is and the various tools, there is going to be some more sidings, and you can see the point work leading off here. So going back round, once we get to the south end of the loops, we come to a whole series of points which are designed to allow the various movements and the various changes of tracks that are required, both from a prototype point of view but also in a modelling point of view. Again, because I'm using computer control, it's important to put in enough flexibility into the track layout to allow trains to be able to move fairly freely around the layout. So, one thing I should have said, just going back to the loops again, the slow line in the far side here is, in real life, that steam locomotives were able to use that to gain access to the loco depot, and this is the start of my loco depot. This is going to be my representation of Perth Brighton loco depot, 63A as it was in BR days. I haven't laid any of the track here yet. I'm going to cut some pits into the timber work here, because all the tracks approaching the depot had inspection pits outside and also inside the running shed. But getting back to the north end of the depot, there was 2 access tracks, one off the slow line, and then there was another one off the main line. And this one here was designed as an ingoing access track. This is an outgoing access track, and the depot was very cleverly designed to allow incoming engines to go through the coaling, the ash pits, watering before being able to use various head shunts to go onto the turntable and then into the depot itself. So I don't have room to get the full representation, the full scale model of Frierson Depot, so it's going to be a bit of a cut down version, hopefully still recognisable as Perth Brighton. One of the biggest changes I've had to make from the real life version is that unfortunately my turntable is going to have to move to the north end of the Edinburgh Road Bridge, which is going to cross the tracks here. So this track over here is actually going to lead to the turntable. So moving round, the tracks eventually come together and we go down to a down and up main line. Again, I've used plastic art to provide some super elevation, and I've also got a freight head shunt which also doubles again as a third arrival reception line. You can see down here that the freight line, because there'll be shunting wagons on it, it's actually level, and the main lines start to drop down, and they'll disappear down at the corner there. That'll be the end of the scenic area, and the main lines will disappear down into Moncrief Tunnel. Now down here we have the lines coming back up from the low level. That's not prototypical, of course, and I did think about just covering them over with a sloped embankment, but it's more fun watching the trains. So a little bit of modeller's license here at the south end of Perth. We're going to have the two tracks coming up, at least to that corner where they'll both go into tunnels, and you can see that the ones coming up from below are rising up, whereas the ones on the right are heading down, and they actually cross over at this lifting bridge across the doorway. Now I'll come back to that in a moment, because to get there I'll have to duck down below my existing removable bridge. One thing I'll say about this is I did do a previous video on this, and the lifting bridge still works well, but one of the issues I've had is that you might recall that my dowels are down at this level. I put them down here because this is the main framework of the lifting section. Now, one of the problems that gives is there's quite a lot of timber between here, and indeed on the solid side, all this stuff. So although the dowels can actually be firmly in place, there is actually a bit of movement in the tracks. So you do have to be quite careful when this is installed to make sure the tracks are aligned. Now, I'm going to go over this, I think, by putting in, and this will be hidden by some scenic treatment, putting in a catch here to keep these boards properly lined up, similarly at the other end. So ducking under to reach the new lifting board. I should say another issue I had was that this was the first baseboard I ever made for this layout, and I discovered that these sections of track bed had actually made them too narrow. So and to be honest, the supports weren't that great underneath either, so I completely replaced. I'd already done it with the lower level tracks for stage one when I was doing the low level. I've now replaced all this timber work as well, and you can see that the risers I've used underneath are 4" by 1" risers rather than 2" by 1". So this is the new lifting bridge. It was quite complicated to design because the two tracks are sloping, and two sets of tracks are sloping in opposite directions. However, they do all lift as one. So if I lift this up, and there we are. So it does work very well, and in this case I have put the dowels immediately under the track, so none of the issues that I spoke about a minute ago with the other bridge. Again, you can see I've incorporated the electrical connections here. This is the socket end, the female end. Down on the other side we have the male ends. Now all the power to these bits of track here is actually coming from this side. So although these are exposed, these are actually dead at the moment. All the power's coming from the other side via these wires, which have which have still to be tidied up and gathered together. Key thing when you're doing these kind of bridges is to I've used a butt hinge here, and the key thing is to make sure that the hinge is above the level of the rails. So whatever your highest rail is, make sure that the hinge is above that, and that means that when the bridge opens, the rails move away from each other. They don't try and ride over the top of each other. So this was the last part of the main line that I had to do. I actually installed these tracks and soldered them to the PCB strip before then cutting them with a fine tooth razor saw. So they were soldered in place first to make sure they were absolutely in the correct place, and then I just cut through them. So it does actually work very well. So that's the story of the layout so far. That's all the main lines and all the block sections are complete. I want to get on now and add the sidings in the local depot and in the goods yard. Shouldn't take too long because the wiring frankly isn't as complicated as it is when wiring up block sections. So I'm hopeful that I should be able to get that done over the coming weeks. After that, I want to go on to the scenery, of course, and I'm sure you all want to see some scenic treatment on this very bare layout. I don't even have any buffers on the buffer ends at the moment, but I think the first thing is going to be to get some platforms in, some backseam treatment, and also get some of the main bridges in to give it a sense of place and make it more identifiable. So I hope you've enjoyed that layout tour. What we'll do now is go back to the running session at the beginning to show you some of the power of using train controller and a computer control system for your model railway. In this running sequence we see 13 different trains. Some of them are sound fitted, some of them aren't. All the train control is by train controller, and it controls all the points and all the train operations, the speed and the routing of trains. Now what you have to do to set up something like this is set up a series of what train controller calls schedules. These are basically route diagrams, if you like, showing where a train starts, where it goes to, in particular whether it goes north in the Aberdeen lines or takes the Dundee lines. You can also decide which tracks are available for the train to use. You really want to leave that as open as possible, include as many tracks to allow for flexibility in train movements, to allow for conflicts to be resolved between the various trains. Now you never know quite what's going to happen each time you run this. I didn't set up this move with 3 trains running at once, it's just happened this way. And it's always interesting. It's a bit like watching a real railway. You don't quite know what's going to happen, which train's going to get priority. I think the class 40 is the one that's getting the go ahead here. One thing that is a bit unrealistic at the moment is the prioritisation of trains isn't quite correct. You can be in a situation uh, where freight trains, and this might be a case in point, there's a freight train coming up the hill here, and it might take priority over the two other passenger trains waiting in the loops, ready to depart south once that Class 40's cleared the next block. This particular freight is going to Dundee, so it'll have the choice of which lines to take. Computer, it looks as if it's routing it via the Dundee loops. Could stick to the main line and still get into the Dundee platform that way, but it's going round the Dundee loop and into the Dundee platform. And then you can see there's the fish train that's got the go ahead into the main upline platform heading north. So as the fish train heads down to the storage sidings, we've got another freight coming in here. It's heading north through Perth, and it's actually routed to stop in the freight reception lines. The idea being that would be an opportunity either to change engines or to shunt some wagons into the freight sidings. So it's going to come into the freight reception sidings for a short while, and after a few minutes it will resume its journey. Meanwhile, this parcels train has been booked to stop in Perth, and it will shortly resume its journey. Now you might have heard the Class 26 in this short freight sound its horn there. I've set it up so that every sound fitted local will sound its horn going past that area there where the local depot is going to be. It's a nice place where trains probably would sound their horn as there's a lot of staff around, even just to recognise some of their mates in the depot. The sound's also organised such that when the train heads for the low level, the sound is muted. Similarly, trains coming up from the low level sidings, the sound gets activated once they come into the scenic area. There's also the usual platform sounds arranged, guards' whistles, and drivers right away sounding of the whistle or horn when trains leave the station. Now, some of our 13 trains will use the reverse loops, and the two trains that you saw at the beginning in the bay platforms, that's one of them has now arrived back. It's the Carlisle-based Duchess. It's now returned back with a train from the south, and it's arrived in platform 5. And there are a few other trains which will use the reverse loops, and you'll see them again, including this local from Dundee. So this is another local freight, empty coal wagons heading into the freight reception sidings. The idea, as I said earlier, would be it would come in here to do a spot of shunting or to change locos. So again, it will wait here for a few minutes and then it will resume its journey. You can see coming up the hill here the return southbound fish train. The Perth station's getting a bit congested, so the fish train's being held to the north of the station at the moment. Meanwhile, coming in from the south, passing Frierson, we have an A4 hauled Aberdeen Express. I should say the lines where the fish train were approaching from, these are actually bi-directional, so trains can use both lines. There are various reasons why I've arranged it that way at the moment, but it's basically to allow some flexibility in trains coming into Perth from the north. Now, it's not my intention that the layout would always be as busy as this, that we would be trying to run this many trains over such a short period of time. But this is all about testing the system out and see how robust it is. Um, the longer term idea is that we will try and mimic the kind of typical timetable that existed at Perth in the 1960s. No doubt a bit enhanced because even Perth at its busiest times still had quiet spells. But the idea is to run it fairly realistically and allowing engine movements, shunting, um, and lots of operational interest, as well as watching the computer run the mainline trains round the layout. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. Enjoy the rest of the session, and I'll see you next time.